Welcome to episode 2 of The Flight of the 50 Fancies. I have a pretty wild guest tonight, so buckle up. First, I want to just say this is a podcast of ideas. Usually we have a guest or three, and we just kind of back and forth what ideas are, the kinds of people who have ideas, and my guest tonight has maybe too many, some would say too many ideas, and his name is Erling, and he's interesting enough that I could not squeeze a last name out of him. So welcome to the studio, Erling. Why don't you tell us about yourself? Thank you, Peter. I have a little bit of a unusual job. I am a ghoul's assistant. And you might be wondering, what is a ghoul? Well, ghoul is a eater of human dead. And, wait, what did you say? But isn't that just a cannibal? Well, a cannibal kills. It's kind of like, okay, so a cannibal is to a predator what a ghoul is to a scavenger. And I am an assistant of one of these gentlemen. And but what kind of responsibilities do you have? Well, I'm getting to that. It all started maybe 10 years ago. I learned that if you wear your baseball cap backwards, you can receive radio waves from a planet made of a radio wave conducting metal who I do not believe grows on Earth. It is a fully extraterrestrial metal, and you put the baseball caps on backwards. You probably have seen a lot of people doing that, and that's why they do it, is because the caps have this metal. They have the metal in the wire of the baseball cap, and you put it on, and you hear these radio waves getting sent down, and it goes into your head, because there's a thin layer of tin in between your skull and your brain, which receives radio signals that are under the frequency of the radio waves are too wide to register in your ear. And that's kind of how I started. There's a lot of messages coming from the iron. It's not iron, I'm sorry, it's metal planet. Where is this planet exactly, if you don't mind my interrupting? No, not at all. The planet is very close by. You would say it's approximate. I'll say no more than that. It is a planet that revolves around a very approximate star, and you could say the proximity of the star to our own is peerless. And this metal, which doesn't bloom on Earth, is in the wires of the baseball cap, and when you put it on backwards, it lines up with the tin coating between your brain and your skull. This is called the meninges, and sometimes people, I don't know if you've ever heard meningitis, sometimes people get shots for that. Yeah, I got a shot before I went to school for fiction writing. Yeah, so people get infected sometimes. This tin around your brain sometimes thickens, and that's called meningitis, and it's dangerous, and you should be aware of it. But I was immune to meningitis because I had glowing metal in between my skull and my brain, and that metal is what sent me to the churchyard 10 years ago on May 14th, 2005. And I received several messages that day. By the way, that day is a holiday called the Feast, and it is a ghoul's holiday, and I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't met my friend whose name I will not state, who I met at the churchyard in, I won't say where either. That's okay, it's totally your story. And I can't say how lucky I was to bump into this person I'll just make up a name. Name of the ghoul, because that's where this is going. The person I met at the churchyard that night, having followed the messages sent into my glowing metal meninges. The name of the person was... I can't think of a name. How about just Megan or something? Fine, Megan. And Megan, she was eating out of a grate. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. You just don't see that kind of thing every day, so there's really only one way to... You know, like how there aren't, like, slang names for trilobites? Like, you see a bug or something, and it could have, like, 4 different names, like, just people making stuff. Like, oh, that's a nipper. Oh, that's no, you call that a nipper? That's not what it's called. And these people just, go on and on about it, arguing about the name of something that is allowed to have more than one name. And the trilobite, no one gives that slang names, because you never come across it. It's just, a scientist gave it a name. They're really the only ones dealing with it, more or less. So it only really has one name. I mean, the same thing goes with events. If an event only happens, you don't see it very often. It'll only really have one name. There's not a lot of names for the impact of a meteor. That's pretty much what it's called. A meteor hits, but there is a name, several names for tornadoes. You got tornadoes, twisters, cyclones, sweetie pies, Kansas surprise. Yeah, there's a lot of different names because people come across them a lot. But there's a mere one name for what I saw at the churchyard, and my baseball cap was beaming a lot of information into my glowing metal when I saw Megan ghoul feeding, and it was, what a good name for the holiday. It certainly tells you what it is. That's actually also happens to be the only holiday during which real clowns can eat, and that's one of the distinctions between real clowns and fake clowns. I was a fake clown before I became a ghoul's assistant. I was a fake clown, and the real clowns also celebrate the feast, which is celebrated on May 14th, which is today, which is why you had me on this program, the Flight of the 50 Fancies. Am I correct, Peter? Yeah, of course. That sounds great to me. So tell me a little bit about your duties as a ghoul's assistant. Okay, well, first I want to tell you about the difference between real clowns and fake clowns. So real clowns can't talk because they are not born with vocal cords. That is simply not a part of the body of a real clown. And their muscle tone is different from humans' muscle tones, and so their facial expressions are very comically exaggerated. Well, we would consider it comical, but to them it's just like, oh, you have 10 fingers, and to some beings our having 10 fingers is comical, just as the muscle tone of a real clown's face is comical to us. But a fake clown can, obviously they're born with vocal cords, like I was, so they can speak, and they can wash the makeup off. So in a real clown, that's not makeup, it's just their skin, and it kind of like, you know how like a clown's eyes kind of have that like makeup lumps kind of around it, like clumps of makeup, and it kind of makes their eyes look a little bit smaller sometimes, and maybe like a little yellower. Well, you can't really, that's just skin for a real clown, and a fake clown, that its makeup I think you probably already know all this. But the one thing that a lot of people I talk to about this kind of thing don't know is that fake clowns can eat 24/7, 365, but real clowns can only eat on the feast, which is why real clowns, like whenever you see like a fat clown or something, basically always 9 times out of 10 they're fake clowns. But a real clown, because real clowns can't eat except on the feast, so they're generally very bony. Like if you see a bony clown, you might be in the presence of a real clown. Although there are exceptions. There are fat clowns that just have very, very slow metabolism. I learned all this stuff. I don't even know if I'm telling. Whatever. When you are a clown, you get a lot of kind of swag, like going to these fake clown conventions. You'll see clowns talking to each other and eating, even though it's November or whatever. There are plenty of them. I went to one in White Plains. That was like almost the last thing I did as a clown, like as any kind of clown, was in the November of 2004, and then in May of 2005. After a few kind of abortive clowning gigs in which 2 clowns were called. I was one, and then there's a real clown, and like the little rule of thumb, if you put a real clown and a fake clown into a room together, the fake clown's probably gonna get booted out of the gig, because even though I had a lot of powers, I could juggle, I could make a balloon into a hippo. I could do the sword and the neck routine with that like the sword bending neck collar, where you put the sword in through a little thing and it goes around the neck through the collar. Anyway, but those are just kind of like illusions. But a real clown can like actually. Well, can't give that away. It's not fair. And that, so that was the last thing I did. I went to the fake clown convention. And then the real in May of 2005, I got a lot of swag at that convention, and one of the things was a baseball cap with the correct wire in it. As far as I know, all baseball caps have the wires, but this one had the one that was able to lead me to the churchyard where my teacher was feeding. They go for the kind of shallow kind of graves. She was only like 3 feet deep, and we, what can I say? We struck up a friendship, and I was led to a place. We got to talking, and I was telling her about how I was a clown, kind of a fraud for not being a real clown, and she showed me where a lot of the clowns that she knew about were buried. And there's part of the churchyard, there's this like old wall, and there are these stairs leading down into the bottom of the wall, dug into the dirt next to the wall. So there's a door like kind of underground, and we went into this tomb, what turned out to be basically just a clown ossuary, or a sepulcher full of clown ossuaries. One thing I learned was that ghouls eat bones too. It doesn't really do much for their teeth. Doesn't do their teeth a whole heck load of good, but I've seen it happen. At least with her, she ate clown bones. I don't know, maybe like a boneologist would be able to tell the difference between the bones of an actual human and the bones of a real clown. Because I guess I didn't make this perfectly clear, but fake clowns are just like humans who are impersonating real clowns. That's all there is to it. And Megan was eating clown bones all night, but you haven't gotten to your duties yet. What did you have to do? I had to do a lot, actually, so sit tight. Of course, I had to do a lot of digging, duh. Sometimes I just feel like I'm probably telling you all the stuff you already know. Well, some of it's kind of self-explanatory, but just tell us everything. the viewers are interested. Well, yeah, I guess I know that. That's for sure. That's one thing I'm very confident about. I had to dig a lot, and I had to clean off a lot of things, because it wasn't like, I don't know if you know this, Peter, but coffins aren't like refrigerated, and these guys weren't looking too good. I mean, they were looking good to my teacher. They were looking great to my teacher, but not to me. And I learned that, like, if you actually do eat a person, like scavenge a human flesh, you're not gonna want to eat anything else, which is surprising, because as far as I was concerned, that was on my top 10 least likely to eat foods, was like the rotting clown meat. Or anybody, it wasn't just we spent a lot of time there just because I knew my way around over there, because the glowing metal kind of went off with the presence of clowns, living or dead, will set off the glowing metal inside of me, inside the person who I am. So we spent a lot of time in the clown quarter of the churchyard, and she pretty much cleaned it out. I don't think we left a single grave, ossuary, sepulcher, tomb, mausoleum, or crypt undisturbed. I mean, clown crypt. Like, if there was a clown in any of these, they would probably get eaten by Megan. Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, if you eat of the flesh, if you scavenge of the flesh of man, you will be unwilling to eat anything else. And that is sort of all of these kind of creatures have, like, the curse that you can't go back afterwards. I was lucky never to actually have to eat any of it, and I was unlucky never to learn why anybody would in the first place. And I asked Megan, and they brought me to her family, who also lived in the churchyard, but they all lived kind of by themselves, kind of just wandering around, and like, they're real wretches. Most of them would never talk to me. I knew her name, and I knew Hector's name, and I knew Eve's name, but some of them just would not talk to me, and they were just so wretched. If they didn't make it into the crypts, like when it rained or something, it almost seemed like they didn't mind just like sitting in the rain, all night, and they were always like really sick, as you can imagine. Not sick to their stomachs, but they get horrible colds and like snorting coughs and just really, really horrible. But as far as their eating habits were concerned, they were happy as pie. But I didn't help any of them. I mean, they didn't really need it. None of them really needed it, but I mean, I guess Megan was happy to have a helping hand. So, we've reached the last portion of the Flight of the 50 Fancies, Episode 2, the celebration of the Clown and Ghoul holiday of Feast. I got a letter today from my good friend, who I have never heard of, named Mr. Ja. And he sent me a text from a small text from apparently a very large text called the Compendium on Reality. And looks like he only sent me 2 texts 3620 to 3621. So I don't really have any context or whatever to like understand what it's getting at, but it's scanned it a little before the show, and if I recall, it's some pretty kind of brief but pretty wild kind of stuff, and I think it's a good way to conclude Mr. Erling's unfortunately prematurely cut off story about being a ghoul in the 21st century. So anyway, so this is, without further ado, I'll just read Mr. Ja's musings on various kind of weird stuff. So it says, in fact, it is in the case of words that are marked by the mention of sexuality, dishonest behavior, animal slaughter, and so forth, and which speak of many barbarous acts, that there is room for suspicion regarding their being the work of rogues, demons, and the like. Such words are likely to proceed only from persons who are addicted to such practices. Thank you very much, Ganathaja, for your guilt trip, really. No, I'm sorry, I'm just kidding. We'll have to piece that together over time, I think. Certainly me and probably many of my listeners as well. So that does it for this week's episode of The Flight of the 50 Fancies. Remember to go on the Daily Doofus if you want to sign up to get interviewed by me. I'm having a little bit of trouble finding interesting kind of idea men and women. So if you are an interesting idea man or woman, please do not hesitate. Get in contact. Get in touch. I think I've given you enough for this. Have happy feast.